What's up guys, Justin here with TheSketchUpEssentials.com. So in this series we're going to learn how to use the extension Profile Builder. In the first video you're going to learn what the different tools are and some things about how they work, and then I'll follow up with some more deep dive things on Profile Builder. So let's go ahead and just jump into it. So first off, we need to talk a little bit about a concept. And the concept I want to talk about is the concept of extrusions and profiles, because that's going to be really important for a tool called Profile Builder. So when you first open Profile Builder up, it's going to have a number of tools that look like this. And so pretty much everything we do is going to be based off of these first two things that are on here. So you've got the profile dialog and the assembly dialog, and then everything else in here kind of supports that. And so first off, the concept of a profile. So in 3D, a profile is basically a two-dimensional shape that you take to 3D, right? So in this case, we've got a rectangle right here. Well, if we use the push-pull tool in order to extrude that, like this, what we're doing is we're taking a two-dimensional shape and we're extruding it to 3D, right? We're taking this flat shape and we're making a three-dimensional shape out of that. And so that's how the Follow Me tool works as well. So you've got a path right here, and then you've got a two-dimensional shape, whatever that might be. So say we've just got like a rectangle with a notch taken out of it right here, right? But what it does is it takes that two-dimensional profile right here and it extrudes it along the path. That's how native tools for profiles work. Well, what Profile Builder does is it takes this idea of profiles to kind of the next level. And so first off, we've got the first option in here, which is the profile dialog. And so what profiles are is they're basically going to be the shapes that you extrude to 3D. And notice how when I pop this up right here, it's going to show me a little window showing me information about the profile, including how it's being extruded, how it's placed, lots of different things about the profile itself. And then down below, we have tools for actually creating the profiles in the 3D space. And so notice how when you open this up, you can find built-in profiles to kind of practice with. So usually what I would recommend is go ahead and start just by picking one of these profiles right here and just creating a shape. So in this case, if we click on this button right here for build, then what we can do is we can go into our 3D space and we're able to single click. And what this is going to do is it's going to take that profile and it's going to extrude it to 3D like this. So very similar to drawing the profile in here and then using the push-pull or the Follow Me tool. However, this is a lot more powerful for a lot of different reasons. And so we'll get into this more in the future, but there's things like this is editable. So what that means is if I wanted to change this profile right here, I could go find a different profile. So instead of this plinth, say we picked base right here. And then if I was to go in here and click on this button right here, I can edit that attribute. And specifically, I can tell it that I want it to update this object based on the profile that I have active. So if I click on apply, notice what that does is that replaces the profile that's being used to create the extrusion with a new profile right here. So that is extremely powerful because now I can draw something in place and then I can change it without redoing the whole thing. We'll get more in depth on these attributes and things like that in a future video. Don't worry about that. But for now, that should give you an idea of how the profile works. Now down below, you've got options for the build, which we've already done. You also have a build along a path. So say, for example, that we had a curving path. So I'm just going to draw a path right here and then a path right here. So just like a double curve like this. So if I select this and I use this tool right here, let's pick a different profile just because it'll be interesting. So let's say we had a gutter profile right here. And so if I was to select this and I was to activate the build along path, what that's going to do is that's going to create that object along that path right here. Now notice how you can set where this goes in the profile using this option right here. So say you didn't like this insertion point, notice how there's an option in here to instead use the bottom left as an insertion point right here. This one's a little bit odd. It's got kind of a strange location in here. Oh, it's because there's a -1 in here. So we'll talk about that more in the future. For now, we're just going to set this to 0. But now say that I wanted this to use the bottom left. So what I could do is I could select this profile, click on this button right here, and I could apply that based on the new placement point. And notice how this is now placed in here based on that. And so in addition to being able to use these pre-built profiles, it will also recognize profiles that you build. So say, for example, that we were to draw just a simple profile. So I'm just going to draw a little rectangle right here, and we'll just make a shape. It doesn't really matter what it is, but say that we had something with a little arc right here, a line that goes down, we'll say it goes out a little bit, and then goes all the way down. So just a simple profile, right? Well, if I select this, what I can do is I can add it as a profile, and Profile Builder will actually recognize that as a flat profile. So we'll just call this test profile right here. Notice how that actually brings that profile shape in here and allows you to save it, and it allows it to use this as a profile. So in this case, I'm going to set my insertion point to the bottom left right here. But now, if I was to click, notice how it's actually going to take that profile and extrude it into 3D right here. And so I could also, if I wanted to, I could replace this profile with this profile just like this. So you can see how this would be extremely powerful for managing different libraries of profiles, whether those are wood base, whether they're steel, something like that. Very powerful from that standpoint. And again, my intention is to go through and do a more detailed tutorial on the profiles as well as the assemblies. So don't worry too much about the rest of this for right now, but that should give you an idea of what this can do. One other thing that I find extremely powerful about this tool is this will also work with profiles that don't have a face on them. So say that I've got a surface like this one, right? And say I need some kind of a complicated profile. So I've used this actually for like flashing and things like that before, but say that I've got a shape like this one and I select it. Notice how I can actually add this as an edge test profile right here. And this will actually extrude a flat shape. So in this situation, I can actually use this to like flash a detail or something like that really quickly without having to do the thickness. And where this is powerful is you can't do this with the push-pull tool, right? If I try to push-pull edges, it doesn't work. Like SketchUp works really well with faces, but not so much with like edges and vertices when you're trying to do extrusions. This allows you to actually draw a flat profile in here and extrude it along a path, which is extremely valuable. Lots of use cases for that. And so the thing I always find funny about this is those profiles are super powerful, right? You can save them on your computer for access later. They're not even the most powerful part of Profile Builder. Where this gets really, really interesting is when you start getting into the assembly dialog, because what an assembly is it's a collection of profiles and repeated objects. So when you open this assembly dialog, probably the best way to start is just click on the magnifying glass in order to see your browser. But notice what this does, and I have a bunch of sample railings in here, so let's go ahead and just use one of those. But what this is going to do is this is actually going to combine repeated objects with extrusions in order to create these smart profiles. So notice if I click and then I single click in here, what this is going to do is this is going to draw a railing right here, and notice how it's automatically splitting it up with different pickets and things like that. And so the way that it's doing this is it's combining profiles and extrusions. And so you can kind of see that by looking at this right here. Right? So in this case, this object, and I'm going to go ahead and sample it right here. Notice how this has a rail in here. So it's got a top rail that it's creating, and then down below, it's also got a post object that it's repeating in here. And then there's also a span, which we're not going to worry too much about spans in this video. That's probably its own video, actually, but that does some more complex things. But for right now, notice what we can do is we can go in and make adjustments. So for example, if you wanted this post to happen separately, and this is going to mess up this profile, but we'll do it anyway. So we're going to set our spacing to something like 8 feet or something like that right here. And then we're going to update this. Notice how actually it doesn't mess that up. Okay, those spans are super powerful. Say we were to bring this down to like 3 feet. right here, notice how that post is being repeated based on the spacing that's in here. So what you do is you combine things that are extruded with things that are repeated in order to create these profiles. And so just as a quick example, let's say that we wanted to create a wall with framing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a rectangle right here, and we'll do an in-depth video about creating assemblies, so don't worry too much about that for right now. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a 1.5 by 5.5, 1.5, 5.5 rectangle right here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rotate that like this, but I'm going to add that as a profile. So I'm going to go back into the profile manager right here and click on this button, and I'm going to add this as a 2 by 4 base, or we'll just call it 2 by 4. It's fine. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set this so that it has the placement point on the bottom center or bottom middle right here. And so now what we have is we have a profile that's going to act as our piece of wood in our assembly. But we're not going to stop there. What we're going to do now is we're going to hop over into the assembly dialog, and we're going to create a quick assembly. So to do that, we can click on the plus button right here. And what we need to do is we need to add a profile member and a repeating component and tell it where to put this in the assembly, right? So say that we were to click on the plus button right here. The first thing we need to do is add a profile member. Well, we already have one in here, so we can use the pick from model and we can select that. So now what it's doing is it's placing this 2 by 4 as a part of our assembly, right? And I always like to go ahead and put a copy of the assembly in here so that I can see what the changes I'm making are doing, right? So now we have one profile member. Well, what I want to do is I want to add a second profile member, but I want it to be this one, and I want it to be up in the air. So I'm just going to click on this option right here for copy profile member, and I'm going to give it an up-down height of 10 feet, right? So I want my second profile member in here to be 10 feet tall. And remember that we can take this object, we can apply those attributes, and it's going to change this assembly in here. So this is a really good way to kind of preview this. And so say that we wanted one more. So say that we wanted 2 plates at the top here, we could just duplicate this again, and in this case we want this to go up by 1.5 inches right here. We're going to click on OK. We're going to update this assembly. Notice how now it's placing these 3 right here. Well, if I was to add a new assembly, notice that it's doing that just like this, right? So super powerful from that standpoint. But what we need is we also need some vertical boards in here, right? Because if you frame out a wall, you don't just want top and bottom plates, you also need vertical framing. Well, in this case, we don't want to extrude these. We actually want to create components that are going to repeat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and use this as an example, but I'm going to draw on top of this, and I'm going to draw this 5.5, 1.5. I'm going to push pull this up right here, and again, I'm just using this assembly as kind of a visual representation for me, so I can see exactly how tall this should be. But then I'm going to triple click on it. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to make it a component. And we'll just call this 2 by 4 vertical right here. We'll click on create, and I'm going to go ahead and move this out of the way so that it's not confusing because it's not actually a part of this assembly. Well, what I need to do is I need to add it to this assembly. So to add it to the assembly, what I can do is I can go into the component section right here, click on the plus button, and then I can pick the component that I want to add. So in this case, I want to click on pick from model, and I want to pick this vertical component right here. Now, this is where we need to do a little bit of adjustment. So I'm going to go ahead and update this so we can see what it's doing. Notice how it's currently placing these on the ground right here, and they're facing the wrong direction. Well, Profile Builder gives us the ability to adjust the rotation of those objects as well as the placement within the assembly. So in this case, I want this to be rotated 90 degrees right here, or you might want it to be 270 degrees, just depending on your placement point. But I'm going to go ahead and update this so you can see how now these are facing the proper direction. Well, now what I need to do is I need to tell this, no, you don't want to place this off to the side here based on the middle point. You want to move this up and over by a little bit. So we need to tell it that this is going to have a vertical offset of 1.5 inches. We'll update this. See how that now has a vertical offset of 1.5 inches? It also, and this is a good use for the tape measure, needs to have a left-right offset of 2 3/4. So we're just going to type in 2.75 and click on update. And you can have positive and negative here. So you could either adjust the rotation, or you could just tell it, no, do this to negative 2 3/4 right here. But now this wall is creating studs. And so whenever you create a wall right here, it's going to add studs in there. Well, one thing we want to do is we want to adjust the spacing. So we're going to say these studs are going to be 18 inches on center. So I'm just going to adjust the spacing to 18 inches and click on update. Well, now we're almost done. So we've got one more issue, which is this last stud is going to be placed at the end right here, which is not what we want. We need this last stud to be held back by the thickness of the stud. So we're going to tell this to have an end setback of 1.5 inches, which is the thickness of the stud right here. Well, now what we've done is very simply, we've created an assembly that's going to automatically create stud framing in SketchUp. And so the cool thing about this is we've created this. Well, if we want to make an adjustment, all we have to do is adjust the spacing and adjust the assembly. Now, there's some things we might do with the corners, which I'm not going to worry about too much for right now. But in this case, I'm going to adjust the spacing to maybe like 24 inches. But if I update this, notice how your studs right here are going to adjust as well. And again, we're not going to worry too much about the junction setbacks and the corners in this video. We can talk about some of those things in a future video, but this just kind of demonstrates the power of what this can do and how easy that was to set up, right? So all this is one profile right here and a repeating component, and now you've got a whole wall. So say that you had a house with a footprint that looked like this. Well, you could select that entire perimeter, and you could use this option for build along path, and it's going to add framing to that whole thing. Now, if you want to get super in depth on your framing, you may want to go with something more like Medique wall. This is more an example and something that you can use to really quickly set things like this up, but it's still super powerful for what we're doing here. And so real quick, I want to get into some of the other things that are powerful about this. And again, we'll talk more about these in the future, but so there's a number of other tools contained inside a profile builder that kind of help with this. And so one of the cool things about this is the Smart Path Select tool, which I actually use even when I'm not using the profile functionality because it's super powerful. So say that I was to create a grid right here with sandbox tools. We'll just do something simple like this. But say I wanted to select a path in here. So say that I had some kind of an opening. So we're just going to pick this opening right here. And maybe I want to do that the other way, but say that we were to delete this out and say I wanted to select the perimeter of this path, right? So that could be extremely time consuming. Well, what this tool does is it'll find the fastest way between points for a selection like this. So I can use this to select this whole perimeter really quickly. And then once I'm done, I can hit the enter key in order to finalize the selection. So I use this tool all the time just for advanced selections in SketchUp. It's one of my go-to tools. Now, we do have other functions in here as well for modifying things. I'm not going to get like way into all of these right now, but we can talk about them a little bit. So the split function does exactly what it sounds like. And so what that's going to do is that's going to allow us to split this. So I could split this whole assembly and we could call it something like 4 feet, right? So if I click in here, it's going to ask me for a gap length. I'm going to type in 4 feet, but it's going to create a 4-foot gap in the wall wherever I click. And then once you've got a split in this closed shape, then you can actually split these objects or actually remove portions of the object using this tool as well. So that's super helpful for things like if you have like a glass rail. So we're not going to save this. We're just going to add a glass rail in here like this. But if I single click and I want to split this, I can come in here and I can click on this option right here in order to do that. We're just going to pick a direction. We're going to tap Control. And notice how I can use this in order to split this out like this. Or if I want to trim it, I can also use it to trim the object like this to remove part of the assembly. So these are all tools for editing and adjusting this assembly, right? There's an option for joining them, which I'm not going to worry too much about for right now. There's a hole dialog for cutting holes in objects. So say that we had, we'll just pick this 2x4 exterior wall or 2x6 exterior wall object right here. So say that we wanted to add an opening in this wall. This is designed to actually cut the opening, and I want the opening to be maybe like 36 inches by 48 inches right here. But I can click in here, and when I click on the surface, what it's going to do is I can click on this wall in order to cut an opening in the wall like this. Now, the one thing that I hope gets added at some point in the future is the ability to like add something back in as well. But this is still extremely valuable if you have like a concrete wall or something like that, something that doesn't require you to adjust headers. Being able to cut these openings and actually adjust them is super powerful. One thing that's cool about this is if you want to remove the openings, this allows you to do that as well. So you can add them, you can adjust them, and you can move them using this tool right here. So this one, for example, if I want to move it over, I can just click in order to move it over. Okay, and so this video is getting a little bit long, but I just want to hit on two other things real quick. So first off is the ability to edit the profile and path of the active member. So say, for example, that you've got this piece of trim right here, and you want to adjust the path. Well, this allows you to do that without having to redraw everything. You can click on Edit the Path, right? So actually you want to double click in here and then click on Edit the Path. But if I come in here and I change this, like this, then erase this out. When I click back off of it, notice how this object has gone along the other path as well. So extremely valuable from that standpoint. Also, if you want to make changes or adjustments to your active profile, so if I double click in here and I want to adjust this profile, notice how this is actually going to bring this up. And so say that you wanted to adjust this so that it follows along maybe more of a path like this, which you wouldn't, but for this example, it's going to work okay. So I'm going to go ahead and erase this out right here. Well, notice how when you update this, it's actually going to update your profile with that revised path in here. So these are all completely adjustable without having to redraw them and re-extrude them, which is a massive benefit over like the Follow Me tool or something like that. All right, so let me know if you're interested in me continuing this series. We'll talk more in depth about profiles and assemblies and how you can use them, as well as using the other adjustment functions, things like that. If you do want to check out Profile Builder, I'll link to it on this page, as well as some other videos that I've done about it. But as always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.